Aloha, beautiful souls. Welcome to A Better World with Adrienne, the podcast portal unrestricted channel where we commune to expand, to grow, to level up, and really create our little pieces that weave together the fabric of a world we're proud of. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Aly Wilkins to the podcast for a co-creation. Welcome, welcome, Aly.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I'm so happy to bring you here. And I really invited you because I went to you've been floating in my field for a while by way of Jacqueline Holmes, who has been on the podcast before talking about New Earth wealth. And then I went to your call for the dark feminine. Am I saying that it's like the call for the dark feminine masterclass? And being in your energy, I was like, okay, this this is potent, this is powerful, and I really want to co-create with you here in this space because it's long form, because it's unrestricted, and there's you have major codes to bring through. So I'm really excited.
Me too, me too. And anyone that Jacqueline always brings forward like the best connections. So when people say, "Oh, I found you through Jacqueline," I'm like, "Nice. This is gonna be fun."
Yeah, it's the four line.
Mm.
So let's set the space, call upon the altar. That's what makes this a transmission rather than just a run-of-the-mill podcast. So on the altar, I have an open heart. And the altar is how we say thank you in advance to spirit. Thank you in advance. Like, may this be a grounding place for miracles. May this be a portal of transformation for the highest timeline and good of all people everywhere. I have Ganesha, Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, removing all obstacles to truth, all obstacles to light, all obstacles to love. I have a rose quartz crystal representing the heart chakra of the world, representing unconditional love from me, from Aly, from every single heartbeat that is experiencing this podcast and every single heartbeat on the globe, human, animal, energetic. And last but not least, we call in the element of air. No matter where you're tuning in from, whether you are driving, walking, skipping, sitting, floating, we will take 3 deep breaths together to connect our energy. So to begin, we exhale completely. Inhale through the nose. Hold it at the top. Feel your ears open. Feel your backs of your eyes open in white light. Exhale out the mouth. Inhale through the nose. This time, feel your feet connecting to Mother Earth, the matriarch that holds us all together. The same earth we all are gripped to as we receive. Exhale out the mouth. And one more inhale through the nose. Holding at the top, bring an intention forward to this space. Why you are here, why you press play, what you are bringing. Keep holding because you're strong. Exhale out the mouth. If you close your eyes, you can gently flutter them open, opening up your arms. The portal is open. The portal is open, and I even feel myself, my energy is just, that's the power of breath and ceremony, more anchored. There's been a lot of mania, like floating, hovering energy in myself and the collective at the time of this recording, which is October 21st, 2024. And so it's always a reminder the body is a portal, ceremony is a portal, and connection's a portal.
Mm-hmm.
I first want to just invite you to share, who you are. You're Aly, and you pour your medicine through all these different portals, but who are you today? And how is that informing the way you show up for New Earth?
Well, I love that you said today because we're always evolving so much. It changes every like minute, right? Um, so in this moment, I am a facilitator, I'm an author, I'm a mentor, and really my passion is in reminding people of the ancient feminine, the
Mm.
feminine pre-patriarchy, what life was like before patriarchy, before we've been brainwashed and programmed to the point that really now we don't even remember, because it's just been so long and there's been such a um, purposeful effort to make us forget. So
Mm.
my work is really in reminding people of the ancient feminine and helping people to embody her within ourselves because that's where she lives. She's just
Mm.
kind of been buried and been stuffed away in the corner and, has like a cloth like over a mirror, so we don't see her. Um, and I do that through work in the Akashic records. I'm an oracle. I do that through teaching. I do that through writing. When I was young, I always wanted to be a teacher, and I tried out doing like high school teaching and stuff, and I was like, I hate this. Like, this is the route of teaching that I'm meant to be doing, spiritual
Mm.
teaching. So the form is always evolving, the content is always evolving based on where we are. I started a lot with the conversation of abundance and sacred wealth and working with Lakshmi and Ganesha, and like now it's more around the ancient feminine, and a lot of the feminine goddesses. So yeah, that's like what I'm doing today. And um really it's just I'm obsessed with remembering myself and learning myself. And then I just share that with other people, and I have the gifts of the oracle, so I'm able to pull it out and move things around and help people see things in a little bit of a different way, and so that just supports it.
Yeah. And I love how you shared you're obsessed with it,
Obsessed.
because obsession is a lost art. I think one of the codes to living a happy life is trust your obsessions and follow them and know that that's actually mastery. Like if you're obsessed with it, you're on the path of mastery. It's different than stalking your ex. Like that's a different kind of obsession. Wow. So remembering the ancient feminine before the patriarchy, and to you, what is an oracle? What is the oracle?
Well, I think everyone is an oracle, but there are some people, God agrees. I don't know if you just heard that chime of the Wi-Fi or something. Um, Yeah, I think everyone's an oracle. We all have the ability to be an oracle, but some people are just like some people are born with phenomenal voices. Some people are born with more mastery in their channel and having an open channel, receiving information. Maybe because it lives in the bloodline. Maybe it's because it's, gifts that have been mastered over many lifetimes. It could be a combination of things. And an oracle is really someone who just brings through divine truth that's not not distorted from their own personal belief, their own biases, their own
Mhm.
conversations, like internal conversations. And you could, this is kind of coming through in this moment. Like you can think about if you're talking to a friend asking for advice about something, but maybe they give you advice that's like tainted with their own like trauma or pain, and so it's not really like clear, true wisdom.
Mhm.
The oracle is the one who separates all of that out and just receives the answer from source. But
Mhm.
everyone has their own oracle, so it's also very important that we learn to develop our own oracle as well. But always, getting support from other people is always helpful. I still get support from so many other oracles because it
Mhm.
gives you just a different spot to see things from. We all have blind spots. So,
Yeah, no one has a 360 mirror, right?
hmm.
And in my opinion, like how you develop your own oracle is working with other oracles because it's like trusting your channel. It's so validating. Like when you go to someone else
Yeah.
and then they say something that maybe you've never said to anybody else. And you're like, oh, wow, like I am tapped in, And you said you were speaking about how we've been purposefully, like deliberately programmed to forget
Hmm.
who we are. So surrounding yourself with that bevy of oracles, and it might not be a bevy, it might be like a few key players, not as a crutch, but as a trampoline into your potential and that clarity beyond the human experience is it's getting out of the way. It's when you become the vehicle.
Hmm.
Yeah. What are the Akashic records? Because the listeners to this podcast, it's a wide range of humans. They all are committed to being part of a better world. So we talk about astrology. I bring in my high performance stuff. It's mind, body, breath work. What are the Akashic records?
So the Akashic records, every planet has its own set of Akashic records. And I think it's the easiest to explain in this way. It's like going to a library. So if, for example, if someone books a session with me, I'm like, okay, we're gonna go to the library. I'm gonna go stand up with you and we're gonna talk to the librarian at the front and we're gonna say, okay, we want to check out the book for this specific person. Can you please go pull the book for this specific person? So the book that will be pulled is the book of this person's soul lifetimes. So
Mm.
I'll say that this person is Nancy. All of the soul lifetimes that Nancy has had, Nancy might be chapter like 412 or 400,000, she's just one of the chapters in the book. And then there's all the other lifetimes that we've had, maybe all the other life forms that we've had. And so it's basically a way that the that source is kind of tracking everything that's going on. And here's the thing. So if we do a session in the records, whether I'm doing it for myself or for someone else, there are guardians of this book. Because if we just had free reign to look through every single page, there might be things in there that are way beyond our comprehension of just like where we're at as in a vibrational space as a species right now. There might be things that we're not supposed to see. There might be things that we're just not ready to see. And so the guardians will basically show you what is it that's important for you now to understand based on maybe like what you're concerned about, what you're um thinking about, where you're at in your soul journey, the questions that you're asking, the things that you really are deeply curious about. And they will point you to the answers on those things, giving you a really full spectrum view of that isn't just so linear. Like a lot of people will be like, what's my purpose? It's like, okay, we can look at your soul purpose in this lifetime, and every lifetime it might be a little different. And depending on who we ask, it could be something that's like, well, your purpose is to exist, but that's like not what the person wants to know, you know?
Right.
Like, no, what am I supposed to be doing to better humanity? So
Uh-huh.
my role as the oracle in the records, you can do this for yourself as well, is to facilitate that conversation
Mhm.
between what's being shown in the book. And this is also, I don't really like roll with the Bible so much, but it's talked about in a lot of ancient texts as the book of life. This is
Uh-huh.
what Thoth in ancient Egyptian mythology, the god of the scribe, also called Hermes, he's the one who is said to be the scribe of the Akashic records that wrote everything. So it's basically just a place that we can go back and reference. It also has like everything that will happen in the future as well, but in different timelines. So
Mhm.
it's like it's written in stone, but also things are changeable and movable. So just as an example, like in the records, if you're might seem very like heady and like, whoa, that's like a lot. But for example, if um I was having an issue in a relationship that I was in a couple of years ago, and I was like, what is the relationship with this person? Like, this is a horrible relationship. It's like tumultuous and just the fucking worst. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's how we do.
Okay. Just like what is happening with this other soul? Because also we can see what's going on with all the souls contracted in our life, what the purpose of those are. And
Ah.
this is where we can get so much information. And so what I received from that question was your purpose with this other soul. You've had many lifetimes with this soul, and then they showed me some of them and how they differed through different periods of time and who we played the roles of and that sort of thing. And they were like, when I say they, I mean my guardians and also the guardians of the records were like, your purpose with this soul is to understand the sacred use of power. And in your last several lifetimes, he has been abusing his power with you, but you have also been allowing it. And so he's trying to train you how to use your power in a more sovereign way. That's the purpose of it.
Mhm.
Versus like a friend I might have been asking advice for might be like, he is, you know, or our own ego is like, he is the worst. He is like a narcissist and this horrible. And so the Akashic records give us this much higher perspective that is free of ego, free of bias, free of judgment. It's all rooted in unconditional love and just ultimate truth. So
Mhm.
it's giving us something that's very clear of all of our kind of like human stuff to really
Yeah.
get to the root of it, right? Because I could have sat just based on the physical reality of that relationship. I could have sat and stewed for decades about this person if I had just like been in my ego about it, you know, and been in like a victim mode about it. But the record showing me that root of like the two of you are working out the use of sacred power. You're teaching him and he's teaching you. And you're teaching
Mhm.
in different ways in different lifetimes. This is what the trend has been. So this is what we might suggest for you to do. We're
Mm.
not attached to that, do whatever you want, but here's the root of it that you can really work with. So people say, and this isn't coming from me, like so many people have said to me that doing sessions in the records or learning how to read the records yourself, one session can be like 10 years of therapy. Where, for example, like I might have been talking about this douchebag with my therapist for 10 years, getting nowhere
Mhm.
other than solidifying how, you know, we can when we're in our ego about things or even just in our like hurt, you know, we can just stew about things and not really get anywhere with it. So the records just really gets us to the root from a space of the highest love ultimately.
I love that. It's like an encyclopedia of the soul.
Yeah.
I just did a solo episode on the podcast called Soul Perspective, How to Ace Earth School. And like that's the bedrock of it is like, can you bring this to the soul perspective? And of course, a lot of things come from my life to some degree. Um, blah, blah, blah. Like like all of this. And it's like, okay, what's the soul perspective? Like, what am I meant to be learning? And it really ties into what you're saying, like going to the root and tapping into it's like this is like your challenging relationship or really anything like that. It's a blip. It's a blip and it's for your soul to advance. Like it's all about how are we growing in this lifetime? And this really ties really the other thing I want to share compared to therapy. Shout out to therapy. I've gotten a lot from therapy over the years, especially when I was younger,
Yeah.
because it was a safe space for me to just like be where I was.
Mm-hmm.
However, when we look at it from a manifestation perspective or things like that, you can really just keep recreating the past because you're just speaking it into existence again and again and again and again. So I think it's helpful to a certain degree. And then there's got to be something else there where we're like, okay, what's catapulting forward and getting to the root of it, like in the nervous system, which is also connected to past lives, because we hold all our past lives in the nervous system. So yeah, it's not surprising that people say that to you. People say that to me about breath work.
Mm-hmm.
We go in and it's not that you have an issue with money. It's that your grandma's grandma had this happen and she was beholden to these abusive men and she didn't have freedom and it's stored in the cells of your body, and that's why no matter what you do, you spend it or you can't make it, or and it goes so deep. So I love how you described the Akashic records and like why they matter and what it can really do for people, especially with the divine feminine and the dark ancient feminine. With the divine feminine, honestly, like I have so much like yang energy, and I have so much like I was raised by women who pretended to be men to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked well for within the confines of what they define success as.
Yeah.
Um, and I was raised on a farm. I'm a classically trained musician, so I'm not a stranger to hard work. And it's been a big deconditioning process for me, especially as a projector, which you get because you're a projector too, of leaning away from that because that at its core, it's self abandonment to, pretend to be a man. You don't really realize you're doing it. And then when I shifted to, I was like, oh, I'm going to be in my feminine. And I was just getting this like Venusian fairy energy, which I am a fairy and I am a dolphin and I am all those things. However, I don't know what it is. And maybe it's me living on my Pluto line for a year, but there's just been this really deep blood clot red, like anchoring into a new way of existing. And it's what you teach and speak on and transmit is the dark feminine. So, what is the role of the dark feminine and why is she so suppressed?
I love this whole conversation so much. Okay. Uh, just when you shifted into that, my whole body is like, yes. So I'm very similar. I just want to start here that like a lot of my family, the women are they're leaning more on the masculine side. And I think like that was a means of survival for a long time, you know, and there was way less information when like people our mother's ages were growing up. They didn't have all this like remembrance of the feminine like on their, they didn't have, you know, memes reminding them like, remember your power, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but I grew up with that influence as well, where it was like all of the, a lot of like the traditional feminine principles were more demonized or more kind of like, oh, well, those aren't really important. You need to like focus on these things so that you can be successful, like no matter what you're sacrificing to do that. And for me, it was like fulfillment. And that's what really, fulfillment is what, like the yearning for that is what propelled me on this path in like 2014. And so going back to the conversation of the feminine, like with the type of environment we've had for the last 2000 years maybe, but for the last bit of time, especially the last 50 years when women have had to become a little bit more masculine in order for us to survive, there's these versions of the feminine that are deemed as acceptable, which is usually like either the maiden, which is, you know, very naive and innocent and curious and playful and really fun, like who we are when we're like 17.
Yeah.
And um you know, if we've been allowed to be in our child, I'll say that. But the maiden is really celebrated. The sensual and sexy is really celebrated, but she can't be too confident. She can't be too
Mhm.
sexy. She
Mhm.
can, you know, there's these like parameters on it that are all really contributing to like what is acceptable in the patriarchy as feminine energy, and it's getting wider and wider each year as we're evolving and awakening so quickly. However, there's an entire portion of the feminine spectrum that has the patriarchy for thousands of years, and the church specifically has said women are not allowed to be this. Women, and we can see this in like Bible texts, you know, basically like women are supposed to be humble and meek and subservient and not speak until they're spoken to and not look men in the eye. And we can see this in the Inquisition and the witch trials when women who weren't even witches were executed and tortured and persecuted for literally having long hair, having like hips, attending a birth, like
Mhm.
these things that weren't even witchcraft or sorcery or anything that was even working in the realm of magic. It was just women really truly showing their power.
Mhm.
But even in some cases, it was like, well, I'm just walking down the street and my hips are swaying because I have curves. And
Right.
so now I'm being called a witch, or now I'm threatening because you,
Mhm.
anyways. So when we look at the concept of femininity, it's been very sculpted by the patriarchy. And so it's like one M&M out of a bag of 100 M&Ms. And a lot of my work that I'm really passionate about is reminding us of all the other 99 M&Ms. I've never said it in this way before. All the other 99 M&Ms that we've forgotten about. And so I do that work teaching about the dark feminine, but also teaching about what I call full spectrum feminine. And there are many archetypes a lot of us are familiar with. And it's fascinating when I'm now calling this matriarchal feminine psychology, which I come
Mhm.
to mind and I'm like, wow, that sounds really good. But when we look at, for example, like, for example, for me, the muse was one that I had so much programming against from
Mhm.
both of my parents in totally different ways. They both demonize the muse energies for rightful reasons. Like when I look at their upbringing and what their reasoning toward feeling resistance towards it, but I received that from both ends. So for just as an example, I have a program called Full Spectrum Feminine where we go into 12 of the ancient feminine archetypes throughout a year. And some of them will be very easy. Like the truth teller is pretty easy for me. The initiator is very easy for me. Those come in very naturally. But the muse is like, when I first started really looking at some of these faces, for me, it was interesting you said the Venusian energies, because a lot of those are like where I've had specifically the most programming. So when I go into those faces of the feminine, I faced so much of like the collective ancestral stuff that was like, you can't be in the Venusian energy or you're going to be hunted. You can't show this
Mhm.
part of yourself or you're going to be ostracized. at
Mm.
best, you know, like all these ancestral things and past life things and current life things. And so we look at like what are the aspects of femininity that we aren't comfortable with, that we don't have practice in. For example, some people might have a lot of skill set in like the Empress energy. Like they're natural leaders, they're responsible and they're sovereign and they're able to like, this might be like the project managers or the event planners, you know, people who are able to like hold a lot. And that's an example of like a little bit more of a masculine, feminine face versus like the lover or the muse or an archetype that I've coined as the high seductress. These are
Mhm.
all more Venusian energies that are much more in their feminine frequency. But we have to understand how to be able to embody all of them and to shift between them as needed so that we can really be in our full wholeness. Like I was saying at the beginning of this, you know, in like old attics where they have the cloths over all the mirrors and it's all scary, like cloths over all the furniture. It's like
Mhm.
taking all of those cloths off and then discovering who we are with this additional piece of us reinstalled.
Mm.
And you asked about the dark feminine, like this is true for all of the feminine. There's so much of it that's been pushed away, but the dark feminine specifically are the aspects of us that I say it this way that are threatening to the patriarchy, that are threatening to people who want to oppress us or have power over us because they know if we're allowed to be these ways that we'll take control back, that we won't ask for power, we won't ask permission, we will just be in that power. And that means we wouldn't allow, like, you know, a lot of the political things that are going on, a lot of the ways that the earth is being treated, a lot of the ways that animals and workers are being treated.
Mm.
So I know that a lot of your work is around how do we lead in this new way, in
Mm.
this new system that we're creating. And a lot of my work is in what is it we need to cultivate in ourselves so that we can naturally create that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, because if we don't go down and in, we can't go up and out.
yep, exactly.
So, yeah, with Earth, I spent a year, I didn't leave Maui for a whole year. And and when I got to the mainland, immediately I felt a rage that I've never felt in my whole life because, I speak to the earth and I hear and I know, and I was, I could hear the earth screaming, and
Hmm.
it was like, she's so sick. Like the land on the islands is really, really untouched a lot. And I got here and I was like, oh my God, it was just like this sickness. And I got so mad. Like, I even feel it bubbling up inside my body just talking about it. This rage. And it still scares me sometimes. I'm like, what is this? Like, I'm curious what your thoughts are because this seems like the one of the aspects that will, fuck the patriarchy. And
Hmm.
I really do believe like if we're constantly at war with something, then we just perpetuate the war. So how how would you share in your, because this is your specialty.
Rage.
Well, not like rage per se, but holding these and wielding them correctly, I would say.
Yeah.
Um Because rage, if you don't wield it, it just destroys you. It burns you from the inside out. So, how can we hold these frequencies while not perpetuating a war with something at the same time knowing it gets to be protected? You know what I mean? Like not not dipping our toes into that, like playing that game of the war that's going on right now. while still protecting and holding this frequency? It's a very nuanced, complicated question.
Yeah, I think that it's extreme mastery to be able to do both. But I also think, like, just talking about rage first, if we think about how women have been talked to about rage, it's like women are not allowed to be angry, even with other women. You
Mm,
know, if we're looking at like a traditional average American or average per whatever country you're living in, how most of us were raised, we're told, don't be angry, be positive.
mm,
Like your anger is going to affect the whole room. Maybe in a more like in a more spiritual type space, they might say it that way. But we've been told that our anger and our rage is inconvenient,
mhm,
that we have to be do that in silence. Like even as a little girl or something, you think, parents are like, okay, you're having a tantrum, you're really angry, go up to your room and do it by yourself. It can't be witnessed. And some
mhm.
of that might be smart. We can learn how to work with that feeling by ourselves so we're not like dragon fire breathing on everyone else, scorching them to death. However, we also like have to start normalizing like we're allowed to be pissed.
Yeah.
And this part particularly like the anger and rage and the speaking in ways that are inconvenient for other people, like this is a real juicy spot of where women have been silenced for
Yeah.
so even like my process is this is what I teach and also just what I've experienced myself. I think that first it's best for us to just allow the rage to come out
Mm.
and realize we are gonna fuck it up. We have no practice in it. We haven't watched our mothers do this for the most part. We haven't watched other women do this. I heard someone say once, like, women are really afraid that we're going to create mass harm when we experience rage because it is this feeling that feels totally uncontrollable. And
Yeah.
the feminine doesn't like the feeling of being out of control. And this is why sometimes there's feminine manipulation. This is one of our shadows as just the overall feminine energy to try to control things we have learned to subtly manipulate things. And that's like a whole different conversation. But we don't like the feeling of rage because it's like this shit is not contained. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I had a client tell me once, she was like, I'm afraid that, it's a boiling pot of water. And I'm afraid how like far is this boil going to go? And what I told her was when water is literally boiling on a pot, if you leave it at a boil, it will simmer down. If you let yourself feel it, we don't know how long it's going to take, but if you let yourself just witness and be with the rage, be with the anger, be with this feeling that's very uncomfortable and not make ourselves wrong for it, that's the first step of just letting ourselves feel it. Then there are tools that we can work with of like, okay, how do I properly move this energy? How do I wield it? Like you were saying, how do I properly wield this? Because it's a weapon, it's a vehicle, it can be used to destroy things. Um,
Mhm.
I really consider myself a dragon of the royal dragon lineages, and I work with dragon power a lot. And I help people with their dragons a lot as well. I just don't talk about it a lot because I think a lot of people talk about dragons that shouldn't be talking about them. But anyways,
People talk about a lot of shit that is
yeah,
it's interesting. And as a projector, of course, you see right through it. And
yeah,
it's like, how does no one else see this?
yeah. So I don't like advertise that a lot, but it comes up a lot for me with the people I'm
Oh,
working with. And dragons, think about a dragon blowing fire out of its mouth, breathing fire. It can destroy an entire village, which I think is a lot of the propaganda we've heard about dragons, which isn't really true. However, but it could also like light a fire for you. It could also, like that fire, we have to know how to wield it, and rage can be detrimental. I think I kind of lost my train of thought here. I was saying before, I heard someone say once that um, when men express their rage, they create major damage and harm other people.
mm,
When women express their rage, we're mostly just inconvenient. Like, I need you to listen to my emotions. I need
yeah.
you. I don't feel good right now, so I can't make dinner for the whole family because I'm boiling. You know, it's more of an inconvenience thing rather than like, it's not women typically, I'm not going to say every single woman, but for women, we typically aren't being violent towards things with our rage. We are feeling it and we don't quite know what to do with those feelings. Um, that being said, we all might have different coping mechanisms. Like I've recognized in my rage, I have a tendency to want to attack other people instead of like dealing with like just sitting with the uncomfortability. Sometimes I have the tendency of like directing it in the wrong place. But that's only something that I realized after I let myself sit with rage for like a year. So
Mm,
it's like that's a massive gem that's already happening in all the areas of my life, in very subtle ways. So when we let ourselves go through this natural process without having to be perfect,
mhm,
and knowing that the purpose of that rage, I know you asked before, like, what's the purpose of the dark feminine? Her purpose is to bring back harmony. And
mm,
people act a lot of the time as if we shouldn't be upset about what's going on, as if we shouldn't be upset that, you know, the ocean is filled with trash and the fish are filled with mercury and plastics and the forests are being destroyed and our food is all poisoned. Like people act like we should just be like, oh, it's okay. And the dark feminine, her role is ultimately to bring harmony to the planet, to bring justice, balance, and harmony. So
mhm.
the fact that she has been gone for 2,500 years, buried down, forced to be in hiding until we just forgot about her, basically. Although we never really forget because she'll boil up and we push her down because she's not acceptable
Mm,
when we allow her, like she would be raging without shame, without making herself wrong for it, raging to correct the systems, but also something I'm learning. Um, because like you were saying, it's always like I go through the initiation and then I teach it.
yeah.
I've processed it because otherwise, like you can't learn about this particular stuff from books. Like you can only really experience it. It's like brand new.
That's what New Earth is. We're not we're not Googling this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So the dark feminine would be raging to bring everything back into balance for the protection of everyone. It's
Mhm.
like all rooted in this really deep, unconditional love for self, for other, and for the planet, like for the collective. So she has a bad name. People are like, oh, she's so angry and rageful, and she's just, inconvenient. I have to deal with this now, and she's making things really difficult. Um, but that's her role because it's the purpose is to bring back harmony. And
Yeah.
as women, we really have a responsibility to celebrate that in other women. Like for just as an example, like even if we don't necessarily agree with something, like the way someone's doing something or what someone might particularly be saying, we can recognize like, wow, she's like really standing in her power and doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks. Like, well done. You
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
Instead of, we'll see so often. I mean, so many women this past year have told me, like, you need to like just calm down and be happy. You need to just like be more positive. Your anger and upset like is making me uncomfortable because they're like not comfortable with that, feeling that within their own body. And so I think the more of us that do this work, and rage is just one of the parts. I'm not saying like you have to be rageful for a decade. Like that's just one little aspect of her. It can also be the dark feminine is very like non-compliant. She doesn't need your validation whatsoever. So all these things are really triggering not only just the patriarchy, but to colonialism and to the patriarchy within all of us, because we all have it. We've all been bred in the system, right? So, for example, if I'm extremely sovereign and powerful and I'm dating someone or I'm friends with someone who isn't, that is going to trigger the fuck out of them because they're
Yeah.
going to say, who does she think she is? But really, that's reflecting. And we've
Mhm.
probably also all done this to some extent where we see this in someone else and it might be our own special flavor of this, but it's the reflection that they haven't embodied that particular thing that creates the upset. And then going back like full circle, this is where the Akashic records can be really helpful because our ego might be like, well, she is just full of herself and she just thinks she walks on water. And the
Mhm.
soul is like, no, you actually just haven't embodied that aspect of confidence. And so instead of looking at why, instead
Mhm.
of looking at instead of digging up the painful things that would require you to do so, to restore that confidence, you would rather point the finger at her. You're just not in that space yet where you're ready to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like remembering the dark feminine and activating her, like it's an initiation. The other aspects, though, can also be like I was saying, like I was really surprised because I teach about I have a course called Realm of the Dark Feminine and then also Full Spectrum Feminine, where we focus on different energies. And in both of them, like the high seductress for me, she started out just being the seductress, and then I like kind of created this, or I remembered this more ancient version of her. So I teach about her from that light, not from the seductress that we hear about now, which I'm like, that's not divine energy. Anyways, that's a different conversation. But those ones, I was like, why am I so resistant to these? They're like delicious and like, of course I want to be a muse. Why am I resistant to that? So, and the dark feminine ones actually come a little bit easier for me. So we each have, based on our programming, based on our past lives, the math, whatever we've learned and done in our other lifetimes, on our ancestry, on our parents, where we grew up, all these things impact like which aspects are going to be more difficult for us to hold.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really powerful to like spend time in each of those phases of the feminine to see um where can I grow in all of these? Where are my edges? What is
Yeah.
it that feels off limits and why does it feel off limits? What would happen if I let myself go into that 1%, 5%?
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones we like for me, like I was saying, the truth teller, when I started teaching about that, I was like, I've got this one. This one's really easy for me. And the universe was like,
That's what happens. The moment we think we know something, we get knocked on
yeah,
our.
it was like, you have the 101 down. Now let's bring you into the intermediate course and the
Yeah.
mastery course because you have a lot of work to do, sister. Don't.
And that's if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this is a lot and I'm feeling called to my edges in new ways. First of all, I want to say that's, because your soul chose this. Like we would not be getting these lessons if our souls didn't choose it and if we were not here to midwife new earth, because it is that, we've had the South Node in Libra for the past 2 years. Libra is very tied to the dark feminine. I just realized while you were speaking, because Libra is harmony, justice. Um, I don't love the word balance because it can be very tit for tat. It's more like the ecosystem. And it's like there's these parts that have been strategically malnourished. And it's just bringing them back to life. And each of them is a code, each of them is a medicine. And it's like, how can you steward the medicine if you don't know the medicine? So it's like sitting with that medicine, like you were saying, like being with my own rage. I'm in rage school right now. I'm like, okay, I woke up, I'm still mad. I did my Joe Dispenza. I'm still mad. Like I, especially about the genocide,
Yeah.
and especially about something that I felt really angry about lately is just the spiritual community and money. Like, because I think operating in like the online bubble of like, okay, we're online and we're like spiritual business owners and we're doing this and we're channeling our codes in different parts of the world. And then, I went to Lemuria basically, and I saw with my own eyes and experienced in my own body the depths of the scarcity programming in the spiritual community and like the broke healer paradigm. And it made me so mad. And partially because I was getting a lot of like, I hold a certain potency and you get the reflections, like you're saying, you get the mirrors
Hmm.
and I mean, we're always getting mirrors. I'm still metabolizing it, but there's just been like a lot of stuff there. So it sounds like what you're saying is sit with the medicine discover the edge, experience, okay, how am I going to steward this? And then letting it be okay for these different parts of you to come online. Because the timelines are different now. Like, let's just be real. The timelines keep changing, but very significantly this past eclipse season, when Lebanon was, the genocide expanded. And it's like, okay, this is why we were raised watching Star Wars, Hunger Games,
Mhm.
like all of this, Harry Potter, because we were meant to see spiritual warfare. We're meant to see what is, there's strategic use of the light and then strategic use of darkness. And it really feels to me, and you tell me what you think, that we're being called to strategic use of the light, but with the dark feminine has been like one of the missing ingredients for why we haven't done that. Like, we haven't gotten mad enough to say, no, no, not on my watch. Like, this cannot happen anymore on my watch. And I experience that underneath rage is always grief.
Mhm.
So anything that's coming through your channel based on that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot, and I think the first thing I want to say is like a lot of this stuff because the spiritual community is fucked up in so many ways. It's not even funny. So, like you were talking about money, there's so much for me around integrity that really gets my blood boiling. It's like I just cannot. But there's certain things that like because of what we've learned a lot of the time from either the patriarchy or from now I'm calling this like patriarchal spirituality that oh we should just be able to do 1 2 3 snap, we're done, we got rid of the rage, we got rid of this, we feel different. And a lot of these processes might take years for
Mhm.
us to fully move through, and it's like for me the beginning of the genocide on October 7th that I was aware of, I wasn't aware of any of the stuff going on in Palestine before that in Israel. And there's been such a long process for me of like feeling rage and then seeing where my own like trauma was showing up in that and how I was then misusing the rage. But first it was like, I have never felt something that has taken my body over more. The
Yeah.
rage and the grief and the suffering and the anger at others and which was also like, and I still deal with this today. It's not something that I'm like cured.
Right. Right.
It's we have to give ourselves time, especially I think for these big things, for them to fully, like you use the word metastasize, I think, before like
Metab
metabolize. Yeah, I was like metastasize might be a bad one. I think that's a bad one.
We don't want that. That means get bigger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, opposite of that. Opposite of that. Um, But yeah, having patience with ourselves and knowing that like as we're moving through things, we are getting better, even if it feels like it's not. Because just our willingness, like I was thinking about this the other day, that I used to always talk about like stop trying to numb your feelings, stop
Mhm.
trying to avoid what you're feeling through. I talked a lot about like, everybody's addicted to stuff. For me, I was addicted to weed for like 10 years, and I think cannabis is great, but I can't use it because I'm like I just have the propensity to be addicted to it and to not be able to control myself with it if I have it at home. And so I talked for so long about like, look at what you're using as a crutch for your emotions, for your feelings. And when I started feeling, so for you guys listening, maybe think about just like the most intense emotion you've ever had. Maybe it's like someone cheating on you and you were royally furious, or maybe it's someone dying and that grief, just like you couldn't control it. These feelings that are so big, maybe even like bliss, that's like, whoa, I don't even know what to do with this. But when they're emotions that are like harder to sit with, just noticing like when we want to run away from them And for in my own journey, and I think this is just like also maps up with the collective journey as well. Like first we were seeing, where am I using coping mechanisms? Where am I having too much wine? Where am I smoking a cigarette? Where am I smoking too much weed? Where am I addicted to sex? Where am I using food to fill in, or TV or whatever it might be, to fill in this like feeling I'm not trying to feel? And then, of course, the next step is like, okay, now let's feel the really hard stuff.
Uh-huh.
And knowing that just the willingness to do that, like it sucks. It sucks sometimes in the moment. But we can also bring in this feeling of like, going to a higher concept for a minute. I believe that we all came here as souls because it's like, wow, there's so many sensations on planet Earth. There's
Hmm.
so many feelings we can have. There's so many types of experience. And sometimes when we like tune out of ourselves for a minute, we're like I've done this before when I was like sobbing on the floor. I was like, wow, it's actually kind of like fun to do this. This is sort of like this is like really dramatic, or this is like it feels kind
You're
of
just
fun
like
to be this.
watching yourself.
Yeah, like it
Yeah.
feels fun to be this dramatic. And then, I like click back in and I'm like, it's the worst. It's horrible. And just letting ourselves like really sit with it. But then after we do that, like the lessons start to come and the things start to come. And even for me now, like I've been having conversations with my friends around having a lot of anger at that other people like aren't embodied in their dark feminine enough yet, that they're like willing to flip a fucking table over to save the children of Palestine, or that they're like turning their head away. And so now I'm also still like, how do I have compassion for that? Because that feels difficult and I can tune into it in little moments. And then other times I'm like, it's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
So these bigger things, like with the dark feminine, especially these bigger things, like, and maybe for you, it's not around this. Maybe for you listening, it's around like, I really want to be able to speak my truth powerfully and with my feet solidly on the ground where I'm not moved by the people around me. And maybe that's
Mhm.
the 5-year journey, that you're moving through with the dark feminine, of like, learning how to confidently speak, learning how to hold your ground without letting other people push you around. You were mentioning something before about, oh, Libra, and
Mhm.
it's like the shadow side of Libra, or I feel like there's another word I want to use for that, but I can't think of it in the moment.
The
Is
unhealed, unhealed.
thank you. The unhealed part is like people pleasing, right?
Yeah.
Breaking our backs in half for everyone around us,
Mhm.
enabling, like, and all those things. It's like the dark feminine doesn't do any of that, but
Mhm.
all of those things are make it very easy to be with us in the patriarchy, right? It serves the patriarchy. So when we're thinking about the dark feminine, it's like the patriarchy knows that the dark feminine would eat them alive for breakfast and it wouldn't even be a thing. It would be like, check, did that. What am I doing the rest of the day? So,
Well, we create worlds. We have wombs. And
yeah,
so like we can destroy them too. And
yes.
um yeah, I really resonate with what you shared about, because it's always like, okay, pointing within, because ultimately what do we have control over? Ourselves.
Hmm.
And and bearing witness to things around you. And this is where it comes into the leadership, because it's like when we can embody the leadership, then it's like, okay, I'm spearheading and I'm paving a path for others to do this too.
Yeah. So even like anyone listening to this, because your focus is really on leadership and this moment at least. And
Mhm.
it's like anyone called to the leadership path, like we have to develop the dark feminine traits. And you probably also already have a lot of them already installed, because to be a leader, you automatically can't really care so much what people think about you. Like your purpose has to be stronger than that, where we're driven to do something, even if everyone is like, that idea is stupid, or like, I don't understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or they just, even if they're nice about it, but they just don't get it. As a leader, you can't be swayed by public opinion and what everybody else thinks. And
Mhm.
one of the things just for me that like I feel like I'm supposed to share right now is, for me, talking, it's like I expect everyone to be a leader because I just feel like everyone is. but not everyone has really stepped into that understanding.
Mhm.
And leaders show up and they lead the pack and they're not afraid of like, well, they might be afraid, but they still do it anyways. You know,
Right.
it's like, I'm not better than you, I'm not higher than you. I just might have a certain skill set that can lead in this particular way. I'd love for you to be with me, not to
Yeah.
follow me, not to be underneath me, not to any of that stuff. And
Mhm.
then you can lead me in another way.
Yeah.
Whereas the patriarchy is like, no, no, all of this is hierarchy. You all are all underneath us. We will
Mhm.
tell you what to do. So the dark feminine is innately like, actually, I'm unruly and I will not listen to anything outside of my own compass, which is made up of my purpose, integrity, my mission, and love for humanity, love for all living forms of life.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that. So we're going to be seeing this with Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto's the planet of power, and it's power plays, it's power dynamics. And it's so there's power over is what has ruled till now, that oppressive system.
Hmm.
And power two doesn't work because you're giving away your power. It's power with and within. So it's all of us. It's a collective of powerhouses going together. Um, do you have any channeled messages coming through right now for this audience particularly?
I just like interestingly keep feeling drawn back to um like soul mission.
Mhm.
And this is really what kicked off all my stuff because I was sitting in a space where I was very unfulfilled, sitting in a computer in a cubicle. I was like 23, my first like big girl job after college. And I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Everybody's doing this. And so I started, it's like I just feel really like Lakshmi and Ganesha here. And I know you already called in Ganesha. And feeling this energy of like if you're listening to this, we are here to lead very particular things with our particular gifts, and every single part of us contributes towards that. What we look like, our hair color, our weight, our height, our tone of voice, the colors we like, all of that attracts certain people into our field towards us. It gives us a certain feeling and vibration. So every single part of ourselves, and I just feel the dark feminine chiming in here. She's like, the parts of ourselves that we think aren't good enough or are weird or are quirky or aren't whatever enough or don't fit in this like sick patriarchal society, those things actually are perfect for the mission that we're actually meant to be doing, which can evolve all the time. However, it always has the same frequency. It always has the same line because it's your soul blueprint radiating out.
Mhm.
So really just what I want to say about our soul missions is that we can't mess it up, but we also have to be incredibly brave and courageous and be really committed to the path of evolving always. Sometimes that evolvement might look like sitting still for a while. Sometimes that's like, I'm transmuting so much stuff, I don't have time to go to lunch right now.
For
And
real.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, I said for real.
Yeah. So I want to just see if there's anything else here. Well, okay, and so I feel Lakshmi's frequency too, and she's not a dark feminine being, but all of the goddesses initially were just the great goddess. They were all in one. And what's happened with the patriarchy is they've broken all of the goddesses up into individual faces. Part of that, I think, is helpful for us because we're able to access, like, they're all forms of our own psyche. Each culture has its own version of very similar goddesses, goddesses of war, goddesses of love, goddesses of fertility, goddesses of um, birthing, all these different things. They're all different aspects within us that we can activate, but they weren't ever meant to be separated. It wasn't meant to be that this person's only an empress, that this person's only like this beautiful
Mm.
Venusian energy. That might be like one of their prominent natural features, but the great goddess is all of it. She's the wrathful and raging Sekhmet. She's, Pele, like volcano bursting, erupting lava, destroying villages around. She's Isis working magic and all across the lands, working miraculous magic. She's Lakshmi, abundant and rich and joyous. So what I was feeling Lakshmi kind of bring in is like all of this deep work, it all really has to be backed with joy. Even
Mm-hmm.
though it can be so difficult and so exhausting and so straining. Like we've been training for this for so many lifetimes. We know exactly what to do. It's just the noise in our minds, and like we talked about breath work and the Akashic records, and those are both modalities of getting out of our mind. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
mind chatter and the mind stuff and all the noise is what slows us down. Our compass naturally knows exactly where to take us and exactly what to do. It's just
Mm-hmm.
sometimes our ego or our mind is like, you should already be here, or you shouldn't be in this place, or you should be doing this in a different way, or you should have more people following
Right.
you. You should, blah, 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 blah. So I just hear Lakshmi saying, even though it's like an arduous path that we're choosing as leaders, also it gets to be backed with joy. And that's what we have to like keep rooting into. And the dark feminine also is super joyous. People think she's just like raging all the time. That's who she has to be right now because that's the role that's needed of her. But she's also like just wild and free and she's having a blast. She's not this like scary thing that we want to avoid. um she's joyous and she's funny and she's witty and she's all of these other things too. So we want to be able to see all sides of the dark feminine, not just, oh, she's coming to rip out my attachments.
Yeah, well, it's just, you know what it is? It's untamed, untamed joy,
Yeah.
untamed everything, unbridled, limitless. It's like, unbridled, literally taking the muzzle off yourself, off all parts of yourself, because joy is the most vulnerable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Being in your true, most potent joy and celebration, that's way more vulnerable than to be seen in sadness, honestly. So I love that she brought that through. I wrote it down. I put back it with joy on my note.
Yes. She was the first goddess that found me. And everyone always talks about Lakshmi as being goddess of abundance and wealth. And I think that's really the westernized thing. I think that she's really just a goddess of joy
Hmm.
and bountiful love, but really like joy, which is the greatest abundance.
Yeah, it is. It is. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you so
So
much for
much
having me.
magic. And for everybody listening, like, I really invite you to sit with this transmission and just like reflect on it and things that jumped out at you. Like, it jumped out at you for a reason, and just trust that. Like, trust your body, trust your knowing. Like, when Aly speaks, like, it is ancient. Her voice is ancient. It's like a mutative frequency. And so if you allow that to awaken those parts of you, it's like an arrow for, why you listen to this, why, and fusing that with your intention from the beginning. That's when you're really going to integrate and make magic with and weave this into your life and our world, because we're out here doing it.
Hmm.
How can people find you? How can they work with you? Like, share us all the things.
Yeah, so I have lots of ways you guys can work with me. First of all, you can follow me on Instagram at ally.wilkins. It's Ally, Ally. Um, so follow me on Instagram. I also have another page at Ancient Feminine. Um, so you can see all the current stuff that I'm doing because it's changing all the time. But I right now I have work with people in a few different ways. One is in one-on-one mentorships or Akashic record readings, which I do single readings and I also do packages. And I also do digital courses live. And then I also have some that are self-study. And we talked about two of them that are really relevant to all of this work. One of them being Full Spectrum Feminine, which we start January 1st with that. It's a full year thing. And every month we have one focus of one of the faces of the ancient feminine. And we spend the whole month bathing in that energy.
Ooh.
So I offer like I do video teachings on each face of the feminine. I do Akashic record journeys. I'm a writer, so I make these really long, um, I don't want to say really long, that might scare people, like 30 to 40 page usually guided workbooks that talk about the archetype and how we implement that in our life. So it's not just like this intellectual, like, okay, got it, that we can actually apply it.
Yeah.
And then we also have you can do that as self-study, but it's just so much better as a live group. So every year I launch, well, this will be the second year, I launch the group portion of that. So that's called Full Spectrum Feminine. And you can go to my Instagram page and go to the link in the bio there to see all about that because depending on when you listen to this, there might be different offers for it. But we are enrolling now for that as of today. So that's about Full Spectrum Feminine. And then Realm of the Dark Feminine now is a self-study course. And we go through 7 faces of the dark feminine. And this is looking at all of the different angles that can be really difficult for us to hold. So, for example, like the mad woman, the serpent priestess, the liberator, the truth teller, the witch. And then there's 2 more that I'm forgetting right in this moment, but there's 7 of them. And so you can go through all that. It's the same format as Full Spectrum Feminine. It's just with a deep focus on um the dark feminine aspects only.
Mm.
So I have both of those courses. I have a bunch of other courses as well, some around more of I have a book called Sacred Wealth. And then I also have another course called Divinely Funded that's kind of like the extension of that. And that's all about sacred leadership. So
Mm.
and how can we become fully abundant and resourced in our soul mission. And a lot of the readings I'm doing in the Akashic records are really based, I'm reading your soul blueprint, so a lot of it's based in soul mission, sometimes the connections around us, but a lot of people I work with, it's really about our purpose and how do we express that
Mm.
in our life, and where we may be having blocks to that, or where our in past lives is it like a snag from us really doing that. So doing a lot of soul retrievals. Trying to think, I think that's it. You can also watch my YouTube if you want more of like a taste of my work first. I have a whole bunch of stuff on my YouTube. So, and then of
Ah,
course you can always go to alywilkins.com, and that's the last thing.
and we'll link it all in the show notes so you won't be missing any of the pieces.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Allie, for this co-creation. Your embodied potency is very needed on our planet. So I just want to say thank you for everything you've traversed to get to where you are today, because we all are receiving, what you have created so far, and it's really important.
Thank you.
So thank you, thank you. And to everybody out there, go be the real you. Shine your light. Go make a stranger smile, because that's what we do here. It charges the whole field. You have no idea what people are going through. You could change their whole day, their whole life, their whole ripple.
Mhm.
Don't forget that your ideas are important and they really, really matter. And I love you all so much. And I will see you next time on A Better World with Adrienne.